I lost my job because I helped an old woman wipe soup off her coat. That is the simplest way to tell the story, and even now it still sounds ridiculous when I hear it in my own head. But that was exactly what happened on a rainy Friday night in October, under the amber lights of Halstead Prime, where the steaks cost more than my weekly grocery budget and the wine list was thick enough to stop a door. I had worked there for almost 6 years. Long enough to know which regulars wanted their bourbon before they sat down, which couples were celebrating something real and which ones were trying to fix something broken, and which managers smiled at you in front of customers only to write you up later in the office. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 42 years old that fall, with sore feet, a stack of overdue bills in my kitchen drawer, and just enough pride left to keep pretending I was doing fine. I was not doing fine. My daughter, Lily, had started her second year at community college and was piecing together classes around a part-time job at a pharmacy. My mother had moved into an assisted living facility outside Naperville after her second fall in the shower. The place was decent, clean, with cheerful curtains and overcooked green beans, but decent still cost money. Every month I moved numbers around like furniture in a room that was too small. Rent. Mom's care. Car insurance. Lily's books. My blood pressure prescription. There was never enough space for all of it. So I picked up extra shifts, smiled until my cheeks hurt, and learned how to make rich people feel relaxed while my own stomach stayed tight as a fist. That Friday had started badly and kept getting worse. One of the hostesses called out sick. The dishwasher quit halfway through lunch. By 7:30 every table in my section was full, the bar was backed up, and Derek Holloway was doing his usual routine of stalking through the dining room with a tablet in one hand and disappointment in the other. Derek was 38, sharp suits, expensive haircut, teeth so white they looked hostile. He liked to remind us that Halstead Prime was not just a restaurant. It was an experience. By which he meant that people with money expected to be treated like royalty, and the rest of us were expected to disappear while making that happen. Table 12 has been waiting on their second round for 6 minutes, he hissed at me near the service station. Do not make me regret putting you on the floor tonight, Claire. I bit back the response that rose into my throat and nodded like I always did. There were moments in that job when silence felt less like weakness and more like rent money. I grabbed the bourbon for table 12, checked on a couple celebrating an anniversary, ran a medium-rare ribeye to the corner booth, and then I saw her. She was sitting alone at table 16, the small two-top near the back wall that nobody liked because it was too close to the kitchen doors and too far from the piano. I remembered thinking she looked as though she had been placed there by mistake. She wore a camel-colored coat that had seen better years, low sensible heels, and a pale blue scarf tucked neatly at her throat. Her silver hair was pinned back in a way that made me think of old family photos. Nothing about her screamed money. In fact, the hostess had given me a look when she sat the woman there, the kind of look that said, "This one won't order much, so do not waste your energy." The woman was studying the menu with both hands, but one of them trembled. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. I went over with my water pitcher and my usual smile. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Claire. Can I start you with something to drink?" She looked up at me with the clearest gray eyes I had ever seen. "Tea, if you have it," she said softly. "And perhaps a few extra minutes with the menu. My hands are not cooperating tonight." There was no self-pity in the way she said it. Just plain embarrassment, neatly folded away. "Of course," I told her. "Take all the time you need." I brought her hot tea with honey on the side, and when I set it down I noticed the cuff of her coat was damp. Rain, probably. Her hands shook again when she reached for the cup. She gave me a little apologetic smile, the kind older women use when they are trying not to inconvenience anyone. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm slower than I used to be." "That makes two of us," I said, and it earned the smallest laugh. For a few minutes I moved through the rest of my section, refilling water, running entrees, reciting dessert specials. But every time I glanced toward table 16, I saw the same thing, a woman trying very hard not to take up space in a room built for people who had never had to apologize for existing. When I came back to take her order, she had settled on French onion soup and the salmon, no butter, sauce on the side. I put the order in and forgot about it for all of 30 seconds because table 12 wanted another bourbon, table 9 said their fries were cold, and Derek was now hovering near the host's stand like a man who believed anxiety was a management style. Then the kitchen runner clipped the corner of table 16 with his tray. It was a small collision, barely enough to make a sound, but enough to send the bowl of soup tipping toward the woman's lap. She jerked back. The bowl did not fully spill, but a ribbon of hot broth sloshed across the tablecloth and down the front of her coat. She froze. The runner muttered a quick, sorry, and kept moving because there were 3 more plates balanced on his arm and no time in that building for anyone's dignity. I grabbed linen napkins from the service station and hurried over. Are you burned? I asked, crouching beside her chair. No, just startled, she said, though her face had gone pale. The broth had splashed across the sleeve and front panel of her coat. It was not ruined, but it was enough to leave a dark stain and a worse kind of humiliation. A few people at nearby tables glanced over, then glanced away with that practiced restaurant politeness that somehow always makes a person feel more exposed. Let me help you, I said. I knelt beside her and gently blotted the fabric with clean napkins, then asked if she wanted to step to the restroom so I could bring club soda and another towel. She nodded, her mouth set tight as if she were angry at herself for needing help. I took her arm. It was lighter than I expected, bird bone delicate under the coat sleeve. As we walked, I could feel eyes on us. Not sympathetic eyes. Irritated ones. Table 12 still did not have their drinks. The anniversary couple was waiting for the check. Derek, I knew without looking, had already decided this was somehow my fault. But the woman's hand was trembling against my wrist, and there are moments when your body makes the choice before your paycheck can. In the restroom I handed her fresh paper towels and dabbed club soda onto the worst of the stain while she stood by the sink, trying to laugh off her embarrassment. I'm making a mess of your evening, she said. No, I told her. You're not. And I meant it. What I did not know then was that those 3 quiet words would cost me my job before the night was over. I walked her back to table 16 and promised I would have the kitchen remake everything fresh. She tried to protest, said the soup was probably still fine, but I told her I would not let anyone eat a meal that had spent time on their coat first. That earned me another small smile, tired and a little embarrassed, but real. I took the stained napkins, reset her silverware, and brought her a fresh cup of tea while the kitchen worked on the salmon again. By then I could feel the shift in the room. Not from her. From everyone else. Table 12 had crossed from impatient into offended. The anniversary couple had their credit card on the edge of the table like a warning. The hostess was avoiding my eyes. And Derek was standing near the bar with his arms folded so tightly across his chest it looked painful. He did not call me over right away. Derek liked an audience when he thought it would help him. He waited until I was dropping off a check at table 9, then appeared at my elbow and said, in a voice that sounded calm only because it was angry enough to be controlled, office. Now. There are 2 kinds of fear in restaurant work. The first is practical. Did I forget to ring something in? Did I break a glass? Did a customer complain? The second is heavier because it is never about one mistake. It is about the feeling that somebody has been collecting reasons to remind you how replaceable you are. I knew, walking behind Derek toward the back hall, which kind this was. His office was barely an office, more like a storage room with a desk shoved into it and a framed mission statement on the wall about excellence and guest experience. He closed the door behind me and did not ask me to sit. Do you have any idea what kind of impression you made out there tonight? He asked. I was helping a customer, I said. You were neglecting paying tables to babysit one guest who ordered tea and salmon. He said it like the woman had committed a moral failure by not requesting a porterhouse and a bottle of Napa Cabernet. She had hot soup spilled on her, I said, still trying to keep my voice even. No one else was helping her. Derek let out a sharp breath through his nose. This is exactly your problem, Claire. You do not understand priorities. We are not a diner in Joliet. We are a premium restaurant. You do not disappear into the restroom with a low-value guest while your high-spend tables are waiting on service. Low-value guest. I can still hear the phrase. Flat, dismissive, businesslike. As if you were talking about inventory that had gone stale. She is not a low-value guest, I said before I could stop myself. She is a person. The room went very still after that. Derek leaned back against his desk and looked at me the way people look at a stain they have decided is permanent. I am done having this conversation, he said. You embarrassed the restaurant. You compromised service. And based on your tone right now, you clearly do not understand the standards we uphold here. I need your apron, your key card, and your employee login before you leave tonight. For a second I honestly thought I had misheard him. My hands were still damp from club soda and tea. There was a lemon wedge scent on my fingers. Somewhere outside the office door I could hear dishes clattering and someone in the kitchen laughing too loudly. The normal sounds of a Friday night kept going, which felt almost insulting. You are firing me, I said. I am terminating your employment, yes. He opened a drawer, pulled out a white envelope, and set it on the desk between us. Your final check through today. Human Resources will mail the rest of the paperwork. I stared at the envelope but did not touch it. After almost 6 years, I said quietly. For helping an elderly woman who got soup spilled on her. For failing to perform your duties, he corrected. Do not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. That was the part that hurt, more than the firing itself. Not the lost income, not yet. It was the way he had already rewritten the story into something neat and professional, something that made him sound reasonable and me sound unstable. I untied my apron slowly, folded it once, and laid it on the desk. It was still warm from my body. There was a faint grease mark near the pocket from where I had brushed against the expo line. I set my key card on top of it. Derek did not say thank you. He did not say good luck. He was already reaching for his tablet, already moving on to whatever problem looked more profitable. I opened the office door and stepped back into the hallway with that strange floating feeling that comes when your life changes before your body has caught up. Megan was waiting near the ice machine, pretending to restock straws. She took one look at my face and stopped. Claire, she whispered. Did he just fire you? I nodded because I did not trust my voice. Megan swore under her breath and glanced toward the dining room. That is insane. Everybody saw what happened. You were helping that lady. I gave a little shrug because if I did anything more, I might start crying, and I was not about to give Derek that satisfaction. Can you grab my tote from the break room? I asked. I do not really want to go back out there. Of course. She disappeared and came back a minute later with my canvas bag and my coat, the cheap black wool one with the missing button at the cuff. I am so sorry, she said. He has been looking for a reason with everyone lately. I thanked her, took my things, and headed toward the back exit. But when I reached the kitchen doors, I looked out one last time into the dining room. Table 16 was empty. The fresh plate of salmon sat untouched, steam long gone. Her teacup was half full. And beside the folded napkin, right where her hand had been resting earlier, was a single cream-colored card. No name. No number. Just a silver letter W pressed into the center like it meant something I was not supposed to understand yet. I slipped the card into my coat pocket and walked out through the employee exit into a cold drizzle that felt finer than rain and somehow more insulting. Chicago in October had a way of getting into your bones without ever making a scene about it. By the time I reached my car, the windshield was already beaded over and the parking lot lights had turned every puddle into a strip of smeared gold. I sat behind the wheel with my tote bag on the passenger seat and did not start the engine right away. My hands were shaking, not from the weather but from the effort of holding myself together for the last 20 minutes. It is one thing to lose a job you hate. It is another to lose one you built your life around, even if that life was held together with discount coffee, late fees, and the kind of optimism that only shows up because there is no other option. I put both hands on the steering wheel and stared at the brick wall across from my parking spot until the shape of it blurred. 6 years. 6 years of doubles on Mother's Day and New Year's Eve. 6 years of balancing hot plates on my arm while smiling at men who snapped their fingers for more ice. 6 years of telling myself Halstead Prime was temporary, just until Lily graduated, just until Mom stabilized, just until I caught my breath. Temporary had a way of hardening into your real life if you were not paying attention. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, and I jumped hard enough to make the keys rattle. It was Lily. For one selfish second I considered ignoring it. Then I pictured her standing behind the pharmacy counter in that blue scrub top she hated, checking her phone between customers, and I answered. "Hey, honey. You sound tired," she said immediately. Lily had inherited my face and her father's ability to hear what people were trying to hide. "Long night?" "Busy," I said. It was. Not exactly a lie. "I am heading home now. Do not forget I need the electric bill account number when you get in. I was going to submit that scholarship form tonight." I closed my eyes. The scholarship form. Right. One more document proving to strangers that we were respectable enough to deserve help and poor enough to need it. "I wrote it down on the envelope by the microwave," I said. "I will text it if I do not see you before bed." "Okay." "And Mom called earlier. She said the activities director is making everyone decorate pumpkins tomorrow, and she wants to know if you can come." I looked down at my work shirt, still smelling faintly of coffee and salmon and the lemon cleaner we used on the tables. Until an hour ago I would have said I had a lunch shift and could maybe stop by after. Now the whole next day had opened up in front of me like a dark room. "I can come," I said after a beat. "Actually, I can come in the morning." Lily was quiet for half a second too long. "Claire." She only used my first name when she was worried. "What happened?" I watched a drop of rain slide down the windshield and split in two. "Nothing I want to explain from a parking lot," I said. "I am fine. I will be home in 20 minutes. She did not believe me, but she let it go. "Drive safe." "I will." I hung up and started the car. The heat took forever to kick in. Halfway home, at a red light near Ogden Avenue, I remembered the card in my pocket. I pulled it out and held it under the dome light. Cream stock. Thick, expensive, almost soft at the edges. No phone number. No email. No name. Just the silver W pressed into the center. It looked less like a business card and more like the kind of thing you handed someone when you expected the symbol alone to be enough. I turned it over. Blank. "Great," I muttered to the empty car. A mystery monogram. That should really help with rent. But I did not throw it away. I slid it into the side pocket of my tote and kept driving. At home, our apartment smelled like laundry detergent and canned tomato soup. Lily had left. One lamp on in the living room and fallen asleep on the couch with her laptop open on her chest and a statistics textbook face down on the rug. She looked about 12 when she slept, which never seemed fair considering how hard she worked to be older than she was. I covered her with the fleece blanket from the armchair, set her laptop on the coffee table, and stood there for a moment looking at her. That was the worst part of bad news in middle age. It never belonged only to you. Every lost dollar had someone else's face attached to it. I changed out of my work clothes in the bathroom so I would not wake her, washed my makeup off with the cheap cleanser that stung if it got too close to my eyes, and then sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and my checkbook. Rent due in 11 days. Mom's assisted living invoice due Monday. Gas tank under a quarter. $183 in checking after I deposited my final check, assuming Derek had not somehow found a way to short me there too. I made columns. Crossed things out. Rewrote them. Moved numbers around until they looked less insulting. It was a useless ritual, but I had been doing it for years. Some women unwind with wine or television. I stared at arithmetic until midnight and pretended it was a plan. At some point I took the cream card out of my bag and set it beside the calculator. Under the kitchen light, the silver W gleamed back at me like it knew something I did not. I remember thinking that if the woman had meant to help me, she could have left a name. A number. Something practical. But maybe that was unfair. Maybe she had left it by accident. Maybe it was nothing more than a rich-looking piece of paper from an old lady with shaky hands and expensive taste. I was still staring at it when my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Megan. Are you okay? Also, weird question. Did table 16 leave behind some kind of card for you on purpose? Because Derek was looking for it after you left. I sat up straighter. My thumb hovered over the screen. Why was he looking for it? I typed back. A full minute passed before the reply came. No idea. He just asked if I saw anything unusual on the table and then got mad when I said no. Claire. I think that woman might be important. I did not sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's face when he said low-value guest, like he was discussing a bruised piece of fruit instead of a woman with trembling hands and perfect manners. I also kept thinking about the card, about the way Megan had phrased her text. Important. In restaurants, important usually meant one of two things. Either somebody had money, or somebody had the kind of power that made money nervous. I set my phone on the nightstand around 1 a.m. and must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I knew, pale light was coming through the blinds and my alarm was buzzing for a shift I no longer had. For a moment I forgot. My hand reached automatically for the snooze button, my body already bracing for the usual rush of shower, coffee, traffic, and side work. Then I saw the black work pants draped over the chair and remembered that they were just pants now. No schedule attached. No paycheck coming. Just fabric and habit. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan until I heard Lily moving around in the kitchen. When I walked out, she was making toast in her pharmacy scrubs, her hair still damp from the shower, and the expression on her face told me she had already decided not to let me get away with vague answers. Coffee is terrible, she said, sliding a mug toward me. I made it too strong because I am mad at you. I almost smiled. Good morning to you too. You got fired. It was not a question. I wrapped both hands around the mug and let the heat sink into my palms. Megan texted you? No. Your face texted me. Also, you have never offered to visit Grandma at 10 in the morning on a Friday in your life. Fair point. I sat down and told her the shortened version. Not every detail. I left out the part about sitting in my car and trying not to cry. I left out how humiliating it felt to hand over my apron like I was turning in proof that I had failed at being useful. But I told her enough. About the spilled soup. About helping the woman to the restroom. About Derek and the office and the envelope. Lily listened without interrupting, one hand curled around her toast, her eyes getting darker and quieter as I went. When I finished, she set the toast down and said, very calmly, that man is garbage. Lily. He is. And I know I am supposed to say something mature and practical, but right now I would settle for him stepping on a Lego every day for the rest of his life. I laughed then, really laughed, the kind that comes out half broken because you needed it more than you knew. She reached across the table and squeezed my wrist. You did the right thing, she said. I know it does not pay rent, but you did. I nodded because if I tried to answer, I would probably cry into the coffee. After she left for work, I got dressed to visit Mom and almost forgot about the card until I reached for my tote bag. It was still in the side pocket, cream-colored and impossibly crisp, as if it had no business being in a canvas bag that also held peppermint gum, loose receipts, and an old gas station pen. I turned it over again while waiting for the kettle to boil. Blank. Silver W. That was it. I was sliding it back into my bag when my phone rang from the counter. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Claire Bennett. The voice was male, smooth, maybe mid-30s, the kind of voice that sounded expensive without trying. Yes. Good morning, Ms. Bennett. My name is Nathan Whitmore. I am calling on behalf of Ms. Eleanor Whitmore. She asked me to reach out to you personally. I gripped the edge of the counter. I am sorry. On behalf of who? Eleanor Whitmore. You assisted her last night at Halstead Prime. My eyes dropped to the card in my hand. The silver W caught the kitchen light. The woman from table 16. Yes. He said it simply, as if the woman from table 16 and whoever Eleanor Whitmore was supposed to be were one and the same in a way that should already make sense to me. It did not. Is she all right? I asked. She is perfectly fine, he said. In fact, she asked me to make sure I said that first, because she suspected you would worry. That startled me enough to sit down. The kitchen chair scraped against the linoleum. Okay, I said slowly. Then what is this about? There was a brief pause, the kind people use when deciding how much to reveal over the phone. Ms. Whitmore would like to meet with you this morning if you are available. 10:30. Her office downtown. Her office. Yes. I do not mean to be difficult, but I have no idea who this woman is. That is understandable, he said. I can assure you the invitation is legitimate. If it helps, I can send a car. A car. Nobody in my life sent cars unless they were ambulances or rideshares split 3 ways after a bachelorette party. No, I said too quickly. No, that is okay. I have my own. Very good. I will text you the address and parking instructions. I hesitated, staring at the chipped edge of my kitchen table, at the stack of bills beside the fruit bowl, at the life I understood. Why does she want to see me? Another pause. Ms. Whitmore prefers to explain certain things in person, he said. But I think it is fair to say she was impressed by you. Impressed. It was such a clean word for something that had detonated my week. And this is not about suing me, right? I asked before I could stop myself. To Nathan's credit, he laughed softly, not unkindly. No, Ms. Bennett. You are not being sued. When the call ended, I stayed seated for a long moment with the phone in one hand and the card in the other. Then the text came through. An address in a glass tower on Wacker Drive. Complimentary valet. Visitor access already arranged. At the bottom of the message was one final line. Ms. Whitmore asked that I tell you she is very sorry about your coat. I looked down at myself. I was wearing my nicest sweater, which was really just the one without pilling on the sleeves, and I suddenly had the strange feeling that whatever was waiting for me downtown had started long before Derek fired me. Maybe the real story had begun the moment that woman sat down alone at table 16 and asked for tea. I spent the drive downtown telling myself not to be stupid. There were at least 6 perfectly reasonable explanations for the phone call, and none of them involved secret fortunes or life-changing opportunities. Maybe the woman wanted to thank me and hand me a gift card I could not really use. Maybe she felt guilty about what happened and wanted to pay for my dry cleaning, which would have been ironic since the coat in question was 10 years old and had cost me $40 at Kohl's. Maybe she was on the board of some charity and wanted to tell me I had restored her faith in customer service. All of those possibilities were ordinary enough to survive the drive. The building on Wacker Drive was not. I knew that the moment I pulled up to the curb and a valet in a charcoal coat stepped forward before I had even shut off the engine. The lobby beyond the revolving doors was all marble and glass and fresh white orchids arranged in low bowls that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Everything shone without looking flashy, which in my experience was how truly expensive places like to show off. I sat in the car for a second too long with both hands on the wheel, looking at my reflection in the windshield. Soft gray sweater. Black slacks. Small silver hoops I wore to funerals and job interviews. Hair pulled back neatly because I had not had time to wash it twice. I looked like a woman going to beg for a second chance, which I suppose in some ways I was. Inside, the lobby was cool and smelled faintly of cedar and lemon. A woman at the reception desk smiled before I even reached her. "Ms. Bennett?" she asked. I nodded, startled. "Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. 32nd floor." She handed me a visitor badge already printed with my name. That did something strange to my chest. Being expected is a small thing until you spend enough years feeling interchangeable. The elevator ride felt too quiet. No music. Just the soft hum of motion and my own heartbeat trying to convince me this was a terrible idea. When the doors opened, I stepped into a reception area lined with dark wood, abstract art, and windows so tall they made the river look like a ribbon dropped between buildings. A man in a navy suit stood as soon as he saw me. Mid-30s, maybe, dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of posture that suggested both excellent schools and expensive dental care. "Claire Bennett," he said, offering his hand. "I am Nathan Whitmore. Thank you for coming." His handshake was warm and brief, practiced without being slick. "I still do not really know why I am here," I admitted. "That makes sense," he said. "Would you like coffee? Tea?" I almost laughed at the word tea. "No, thank you." He gestured toward a seating area near the windows. "Ms. Whitmore is finishing a call. She will be with you in a moment." I sat on the edge of a cream-colored chair that was probably worth more than my couch and tried not to look as out of place as I felt. On the low table in front of me were business magazines, a crystal bowl of wrapped chocolates, and a framed black and white photograph of a woman in a white chef's coat standing in front of what looked like an old diner. I leaned closer. Even grainy and young, there was something familiar about the eyes. "That was her first restaurant," Nathan said from beside me. I looked up. "She started in hospitality?" "She started as a waitress in Milwaukee at 17, he said. "Then she bought the diner. Then 3 more. Then a hotel group. Then she got bored and moved into investment." I stared at him. "I am sorry. Who exactly is she?" Nathan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Eleanor Whitmore. Founder of Whitmore Capital. Majority stakeholder in Whitmore Hospitality Group. Various boards, foundations, and a frankly unreasonable number of properties." He said it in the same tone someone else might use to describe a favorite aunt who knitted too much. I looked back at the photograph. The same eyes. The same careful mouth. Suddenly the silver W on the card felt almost ridiculous in its simplicity. "You are telling me," I said slowly, "that the woman Derek called a low-value guest owns half the city?" "Not half," Nathan said. "Though she would probably enjoy hearing you say that." Before I could answer, a door opened behind us. I stood instinctively. Eleanor Whitmore walked into the room wearing a cream blouse, tailored navy slacks, and a long camel cardigan that made her look elegant in the sort of effortless way only money or age can manage. Her silver hair was pinned back exactly as it had been the night before, but the woman in front of me no longer looked small. She looked composed. Deliberate. Not fragile in the slightest. "Claire," she said, as if we were picking up a conversation instead of beginning one. "Thank you for coming downtown after the week I have given you." I must have looked stunned because she smiled, and there it was again, the same quiet smile from table 16. "Please sit," she said. And before we discuss anything else, let me say this plainly. I am deeply sorry you lost your job because you chose to help me. I sat because my knees had gone unreliable. I still do not understand what is happening, I said. Eleanor lowered herself into the chair across from me with the kind of poise that made every movement look intentional. That is fair, she said. Then let us start with the truth. I did not walk into Halstead Prime by accident last night. I was there to see how your management team treats people when they believe no one important is watching. And Claire, they failed that test more thoroughly than even I expected. I must have looked unconvinced, because Eleanor folded her hands in her lap and gave me the same patient expression I imagined she once used on stubborn bankers and difficult children. I know how this sounds, she said. A wealthy woman in a tailored cardigan claims she was conducting a moral experiment in a steakhouse. If I were you, I would be skeptical too. I am trying very hard to be polite, I admitted. Nathan made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh and then hid it by adjusting his glasses. Eleanor's mouth curved. That is one of the reasons I asked you here. She leaned forward slightly. Claire, I did not go to Halstead Prime for the salmon. I went because the numbers from that location have been too perfect for too long. I frowned. Perfect. Guest satisfaction reports that read like advertising copy. Employee retention numbers that do not match payroll trends. Mystery shopper reviews so polished. They might as well have been written by the same hand. When a business looks flawless on paper, it usually means somebody is doing a great deal of cleaning behind the scenes. Nathan stepped toward the low table and set a slim folder in front of me. Halstead Prime is part of a regional hospitality group, he said. Ms. Whitmore owns the parent company. Over the last 6 months, we have had anonymous complaints about management practices there and at 2 sister locations. Nothing dramatic enough for a lawsuit. Just patterns. Older guests ignored unless they looked wealthy. Staff pushed to prioritize visible spending over actual service. Complaints quietly erased from internal reporting. Tip irregularities. Retaliation against employees who objected. He said it calmly, but each phrase landed with a cold little click in my chest because none of it surprised me. That was the worst part. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, graphs, staff schedules, summaries with dates. One page had Derek's name on it. Another listed turnover percentages by quarter. I did not understand all of it, but I understood enough to know this was not a spontaneous act of gratitude from a rich woman with too much time on her hands. So you went and dressed like, I looked at Eleanor's cardigan, then stopped myself. Like someone Derek would underestimate, she finished for me. Yes. She did not seem offended. I have found that people reveal themselves fastest when they believe you cannot affect their future. I thought of the hostess steering her to the worst table. The kitchen runner muttering sorry without slowing down. Derek calling her low value. And you do this often? Not often, she said. Only when I have reason to think the culture of a place has rotted beneath the polish. She let that sit for a moment. What happened last night confirmed more than I expected. The way my reservation was handled. The table placement. The lack of concern after the spill. Your manager's response to your helping me. And then, of course, your termination. My stomach tightened again at the word. Fired sounded different in that room. Smaller, somehow, and more absurd. I still do not understand why I am here, I said. If you already know what happened, why do you need me? Nathan and Eleanor exchanged a quick glance, not secretive, more like two people checking they were about to say the same difficult thing. Eleanor answered first. Because I do not want a sanitized report. I want the truth from someone who has lived inside that building. I looked from her to the folder and back. You want me to tell you Derek is awful? I already know Derek is awful, she said dryly. What I need to know is whether Halstead Prime has a management problem or a culture problem. Whether he is a bad man in a decent system or simply the face of something larger. That hit harder than I expected, because I knew the answer before I had words for it. Derek was cruel in the polished, efficient way some managers are, but he had not invented the rules. He had just mastered them. It is bigger than him, I said quietly. He did not make those priorities up out of nowhere. Eleanor nodded once, as if I had confirmed a suspicion she hated being right about. That is what I thought. Nathan took the folder back and replaced it with a legal pad. We would like to hire you as a consultant for a short internal review, he said. Paid, of course. I blinked at him. Hire me. Temporarily at first, he said. You would meet with us, answer questions, help us identify patterns, and potentially speak with current and former staff members who might trust you more than they trust corporate. My first instinct was to laugh. My second was to stand up and leave before I embarrassed myself by admitting how badly I needed whatever money came attached to that sentence. I am a waitress, I said. Former waitress, apparently. I am not a consultant. Titles are flexible, Eleanor said. Integrity is not. She said it so simply that for a second I forgot to be defensive. Why me? I asked. Because you helped a woman everyone else found inconvenient, she said. Because you did it knowing there was a cost, even if you did not know how high it would be. And because when Derek called me a low-value guest, you corrected him. Not for show. Not because you knew who I was. You corrected him because it offended you. She tilted her head slightly. Do you know how rare that is in rooms built around money? I did not answer. I was thinking about the bills on my kitchen table. About Lily's scholarship form. About my mother asking me to come decorate pumpkins because she still believed I had a normal work schedule. Temporary consulting work with a billionaire's company sounded less like an opportunity than the opening scene of a mistake. If I say yes, I asked carefully, what exactly happens next? Nathan slid a single sheet toward me. It was not a contract, not yet. More like an outline. Interviews. Observation notes. A review of staff practices. Confidentiality terms. A stipend amount that made my pulse jump so hard I had to read it twice. Eleanor watched my face and seemed to understand the exact moment I reached the number. I do not believe kindness should be punished, she said. And I do not believe honesty should be cheap. I looked down at the paper again, at the figure that could cover Mom's next 2 months of care and keep Lily in school long enough for us to breathe. It was more money than Halstead Prime had paid me in nearly 3 months. My throat felt tight. There is one condition, Eleanor added. I looked up. You tell me the truth even if it reflects badly on us. On me. On the company. I am not interested in revenge, Claire. I am interested in rot. If it is there, I want it cut out cleanly. I should tell you I did not say yes right away. Not because I did not need the money. God, I needed the money. I needed it in the way people need antibiotics or breaks. Urgently. Practically. Without dignity. But I had spent enough years being poor to know that generous offers sometimes came with strings so fine you could not see them until they were wrapped around your throat. So I asked for an hour. Eleanor agreed without blinking. Nathan had someone print the temporary agreement, and while they did that, he walked me through the details one more time in a smaller conference room with a view of the river and a tray of pastries nobody touched. 4 weeks. Paid weekly. I would meet with Nathan and one internal compliance director, review staff accounts, help identify patterns in service culture at Halstead Prime and 2 related locations, and sit in on what he called observational audits, which sounded much cleaner than what it really meant. It meant watching people reveal who they were when they thought the room was beneath them. You can say no, Nathan told me. You can also stop at any point if this becomes uncomfortable. I almost smiled at that. As if discomfort had not been the unofficial dress code of my adult life. I signed anyway. My hand shook a little when I wrote Claire Bennett across the bottom of the page. Nathan did not comment on it. He only handed me a copy, a temporary access badge, and a company-issued notebook with unlined cream pages that felt far too nice for the things I was about to write in it. By the time I left the building, the city had turned bright and cold, one of those sharp blue October mornings that make every window look expensive. I sat in my car in the parking garage and stared at the signed agreement on the passenger seat. 4 weeks. It was not a miracle. It was not even stability. But it was air. Enough air to keep the lights on and tell Lily she could finish the semester without pretending she did not need textbooks. Enough air to take my mother a decent winter coat instead of promising I would look for one after the next paycheck. I called Mom first because I could not bear the idea of showing up late without warning. She answered on the second ring with all the dramatic suspicion of a woman who believed every phone call before noon meant either bad news or telemarketing. Claire. Are you dead? No, Mom. Then why are you not here carving pumpkins with the elderly? I got delayed. That was technically true. Something came up. Something good or something expensive? I am honestly not sure yet. She hummed as if that confirmed everything she already believed about my life choices. Well, if it is expensive, make sure they at least offer lunch. I promised I would visit the next day and hung up smiling despite myself. Then I called Lily. She answered in a whisper because she was at work, and I gave her the edited version. A consulting job. Temporary. Good pay. Weird circumstances. I left out the part where the consultant in question still had a coffee stain on the inside of her tote bag and had no business being in a room full of corporate reports. Is this legal? She asked immediately. I think so, I said. That is not the answer I wanted. It is the answer I have. She was quiet for a second. Do you trust them? I looked at the Whitmore badge clipped to my bag and thought about Eleanor saying I am interested in rot. I trust that they know exactly what they are doing, I said. I am still deciding whether that is comforting. Lily laughed softly. Well. If the rich lady turns out to be a supervillain, call me first. By Monday morning I was back near Halsted Prime, only this time I was sitting in a private office 2 floors above the dining room with a woman from compliance named Sandra who wore navy sheath dresses and had the kind of calm face that made lying feel embarrassing. Nathan joined us by video from another property in Milwaukee. On the table were time cards, complaint logs, exit interviews, payroll summaries, and a stack of printed emails that had apparently survived several attempts at deletion. We are starting small, Sandra said. Walk us through a normal Friday night. Not the polished version. The real one. So I did. I told them how sections were assigned. Which servers got the patio because Derek thought they photographed well. Which hosts knew to move older couples away from the windows if they ordered iced tea instead of Pinot Noir. How certain regulars could be rude enough to curdle cream and still get free dessert because they tipped in $100 bills at Christmas. I told them about the language Derek used. Not always out loud, and never in front of corporate, but enough. Good tables. Dead tables. Strong covers. Soft covers. Money tables. Sympathy tables. High-maintenance old ladies. Birthday nobodies. It sounded uglier in that office than it had in the restaurant, maybe because fluorescent truth is less flattering than candlelight. Sandra took notes without interrupting. Nathan asked precise questions about tip-outs, table rotation, and write-up patterns. By the end of the morning I had filled 20 pages of the cream notebook and felt like I needed a shower. You were right, I told Sandra as she gathered the files. It is bigger than Derek. She nodded once. It usually is. That afternoon, she asked whether there were former employees who might talk to us if the request came from me instead of corporate. I thought of Megan first. Then Luis from the bar, who quit after his overtime mysteriously stopped appearing on paychecks. Then Janice, a 61-year-old hostess Derek pushed to weekends only because he said she did not have the right energy at the front desk. By evening I had texted 4 people and heard back from 3. Megan replied first. Are you serious? You are working for the woman from table 16? I sent back, it is temporary. Also yes. Her answer came almost immediately. Then I have things to tell you. A lot of things. We met that night at a diner in Berwyn because Megan did not want to risk being seen downtown. She arrived in a hoodie with her hair in a messy bun and slid into the booth looking like she had not slept. I thought Derek was awful, she said after the waitress left our coffees. I did not realize he might actually be stupid. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a thick rubber-banded stack of screenshots. Group messages. Shift notes. Photos of handwritten Siduwork charts. And right there, on top, was a message from Derek to 2 assistant managers sent 3 weeks before I was fired. Prioritize visible spend. If a table looks like water and coupons, move service to stronger covers. No freebies unless they can influence reviews or donor events. I stared at the words until the diner around us blurred. Megan wrapped both hands around her mug. That is not even the worst of it, she said quietly. Claire, they have been stealing from people. Not just customers. Us too. Megan was right. Derek was not just cruel. He was organized. There is something especially ugly about dishonesty when it wears a pressed shirt and speaks in complete sentences. She spent the next hour walking me through screenshots, pay stubs, and side-by-side photos of shift sheets that made my stomach turn. Servers were being cut from the floor early on slow nights, then later shown as having worked full shifts in the payroll system when it benefited management's labor metrics. Tip pool percentages shifted from week to week with no explanation. Private event gratuities were sometimes coded as service adjustments, which sounded harmless until you realized the money never reached the people who carried trays for 6 hours in stiff shoes. There were guest complaints marked resolved even when the guest had never been called back. There were notes about moving elderly diners away from prime tables if they did not fit the room. And there were messages from Derek that read less like management and more like a man trying to turn human beings into categories he could sort by profit margin. I photographed everything Megan had brought and sent copies to Sandra before I even got home. By the next morning, Whitmore's compliance team had opened a formal internal review. That sounds neat when you say it quickly. Formal internal review. In reality, it meant 3 days of interviews, payroll audits, security footage requests, and the kind of tense silence that settles over a workplace when people sense the floor shifting under them but do not yet know who is about to fall through it. I met Sandra and Nathan in a conference room at one of Whitmore's satellite offices in Oak Brook because Eleanor did not want anyone connecting my car to the downtown tower too often. It still felt absurd that I had become someone whose parking patterns required strategy. Sandra had color-coded tabs spread across the table. Red for payroll discrepancies. Blue for guest treatment issues. Yellow for retaliation complaints. There was a lot of yellow. Megan's documentation gave us enough to pull the last 18 months of payroll records, Sandra said. It also gave us a reason to subpoena deleted management messages from company devices if necessary. Can you actually do that? I asked. Nathan looked up from his laptop. When the devices belong to the company and there is credible evidence of misconduct, yes. He turned the screen toward me. And apparently Derek was under the impression that deleting messages is the same thing as erasing them. On the screen was a recovered thread between Derek and one of the assistant managers. A guest had complained that her father, who used a walker, had been made to wait while 2 younger couples were seated ahead of him. Derek's response was 4 words long. Avoid optics. Comp stronger tables. I read it twice because I wanted to be sure I understood. He had not written apologize. He had not written fix it. He had not even written be careful. He had written stronger tables, as if kindness were something you allocated only where it would produce a return. I want to say I cannot believe people think like this, I said, but apparently I can. Sandra closed the laptop. What matters now is whether we can prove this was not isolated. By the end of that week, we could. Janice, the 61-year-old hostess, told us Derek had repeatedly taken her off high-visibility shifts because, in his words, the front door sets the tone. Louise from the bar showed us 2 months of overtime discrepancies and one humiliating write-up for negative energy, after he asked about them. A line cook named Oscar admitted he had been told to refire entrees for VIP tables while standard guests waited, even when those standard guests were elderly or celebrating anniversaries. A former server I barely knew sent a voice memo describing how Derek coached staff to identify donor types by watches, handbags, and whether guests ordered sparkling water without asking the price. Piece by piece, the place I had spent 6 years trying to survive began to look less like a restaurant and more like a machine built to flatter the rich while quietly grinding down everyone else. Eleanor stayed mostly out of the interviews, which I respected. When she did appear, it was never for drama. She would ask 1 or 2 questions, listen with that unnerving stillness of hers, and then thank people in a way that made them sit up straighter. She never interrupted. Never raised her voice. Somehow that made her more intimidating, not less. On the following Tuesday, Nathan called me into a glass-walled conference room just after noon. "We are ready for the next step," he said. He looked tired for the first time since I had met him, tie loosened, sleeves rolled once at the forearms. Tomorrow night Halstead Prime is hosting a regional donor dinner for the Whitmore Foundation. Derek thinks it is a visibility opportunity. He has been angling for a promotion tied to the event for months. I stared at him. "You are still letting him run it?" "Only long enough to let him finish climbing onto the stage," Nathan said. He slid a printed schedule across the table. Cocktail hour. Seated dinner. Foundation remarks. Post-event management debrief in the private dining room. My eyes landed on the last line and stayed there. "That is where we do it," he said quietly. "Eleanor wants the confrontation contained, documented, and impossible to spin. We will have legal, human resources, compliance, and regional operations in the room. Derek thinks he is walking into a strategy meeting about his future. In a way, he is." I looked down at the schedule again. My pulse had started that annoying, uneven thudding it does when fear and adrenaline shake hands. "And me? You will be there. In the room. In the room." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Nathan, I was a waitress there a week ago. If I walk into a management debrief, Derek is going to know something is wrong before anyone says a word." "That is part of the point," he said. "He needs to understand, clearly and in real time, exactly which person he underestimated." I should have felt triumphant. I did not. I felt tired. Tense. A little sick. Revenge is glamorous only in stories told by people who have never had to sit across from the source of their rent money and remember the exact tone he used when he decided you were disposable. Nathan seemed to read some of that on my face. "Claire," he said more gently, "nobody is asking you to perform. You do not need to give a speech. You just need to tell the truth if he tries to lie." I thought of Derek's office. The envelope. The apron folded on his desk like a surrendered flag. Then I thought of Eleanor in that cheap table by the kitchen, dabbing soup off her coat while pretending not to notice the way the room had already decided she did not matter. What if he denies everything? I asked. Nathan's expression did not change. Then Sandra plays the footage. Then payroll walks through the records. Then legal explains what wage theft and falsified reporting mean when written on company letterhead. He slid one final page toward me. A still frame from Halstead Prime security footage. There I was, kneeling beside Eleanor's chair with a stack of white napkins in my hand. Derek stood in the background near the service station, watching. His face was turned slightly, but even in a grainy still image I recognized the look. Annoyed. Impatient. Certain the problem in front of him was me. Nathan tapped the photo once. Tomorrow night, he said, we stop letting him decide who has value. The donor dinner was on a Thursday, and by 6:30 Halstead Prime looked exactly the way it always did when rich people were trying to impress other rich people. The candles were lit. The glasses caught the light like jewelry. Servers moved in polished lines with trays balanced at shoulder height, and every smile in the room had been ironed flat for the occasion. I arrived through the side entrance with Sandra and a member of legal I had not met before, a quiet woman named Priya who carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of someone who had ended several careers without ever raising her voice. We waited upstairs in a private office while the event unfolded below us. Nathan moved between floors, calm as ever, updating Eleanor by text. I did not see her until just before dessert, when she stepped out of the elevator in a deep green dress and a pearl bracelet, no cardigan, no pretense, every inch the woman whose name was on the building. I watched on the security monitor as Derek crossed the dining room to greet her, his smile wide and eager, his posture sharpened by ambition. He had no idea. That was the strangest part. He had spent so much energy sorting people by visible worth that he had failed to recognize the one person in the room who could end him with a sentence. The event wrapped a little after 9. Donors drifted out. The last coffee cups were cleared. Downstairs, staff began resetting the room for lunch service the next day. Upstairs, the private dining room filled one chair at a time. Regional operations. Human resources. Sandra. Priya. Nathan. Eleanor at the head of the table, hands folded, expression unreadable. I sat halfway down on the left, close enough to the wall that I could have disappeared if the room had allowed it. Derek entered last, carrying a tablet and wearing the pleased, slightly over-caffeinated look of a man who believed he had just hosted the most important night of his career. He stopped when he saw me. Not dramatically. Just a tiny hitch in his stride, a flicker in his face before he recovered. "Claire," he said, and the false warmth in his voice was almost impressive. "I was not aware you would be joining us." "That is because no one asked your permission," Eleanor said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room changed temperature anyway. Derek turned toward her, still smiling, though the edges of it had tightened. "Of course," he said. "I simply meant I would have liked to be informed of all attendees." "You were informed of everyone necessary," Nathan said. "Please sit." Derek sat. One of the assistant managers, a woman named Colleen, looked as if she wanted to sink through the floor. The other regional staff kept their eyes on their notepads. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Then Eleanor looked directly at Derek and said, "How would you evaluate the culture of Halstead Prime?" It was such an ordinary corporate question that I almost laughed. Derek did not. He launched into a polished summary about standards, guest experience, revenue growth, team accountability. He used phrases like elevated service environment and strategic table management. He praised donor engagement. He mentioned labor efficiency and community reputation. If I had not known what I knew, I might have believed him. He was good at the language of virtue. That was part of what made him dangerous. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked, "And how do you define a valuable guest?" The room went still. Derek smiled carefully. "Every guest is valuable, of course." Sandra reached for the remote. On the wall behind Derek, a monitor flickered to life. Security footage. Halstead Prime, last Friday, timestamp in the corner. There I was at table 16, kneeling beside Eleanor's chair with white napkins in my hand. There was Derek near the service station, watching with that annoyed, impatient look I knew too well. No one in the room moved. Sandra paused the footage and placed a printed transcript on the table in front of Derek. At 8:14 p.m., she said, "You referred to Ms. Whitmore as a low-value guest while criticizing Ms. Bennett for assisting her after a spill. Would you like to revise your answer?" Derek's face did not collapse all at once. It tightened in stages. First confusion, then calculation, then the dawning realization that the room had been arranged around evidence, not discussion. "I do not recall using that phrase," he said. Priya opened her portfolio. "We also have payroll records, internal messages, and witness statements regarding tip diversion, manipulated labor reporting, guest discrimination based on perceived spending power, and retaliatory termination practices." She slid a packet across to him. "You are welcome to review the documentation before responding." He did not touch it. His eyes flicked to me, then to Eleanor, then to Nathan, as if one of us might blink and reveal this was still salvageable. "With respect," he said, voice thinning at the edges, "this feels like a misunderstanding of management language. High-volume hospitality requires triage. Prioritization. If certain phrasing was inelegant, I regret that, but the intent was always operational." "Operational," Eleanor repeated. "Is that what you call moving elderly guests out of visible sections because they do not fit the room?" Sandra clicked to the next slide. A recovered message from Derek: "If a table looks like water and coupons, move service to stronger covers." Another click. A complaint from a daughter whose father waited with a walker while younger diners were seated ahead of him. Another click. Payroll discrepancies. Overtime removed. Event gratuities recoded. Another click. My termination form, timestamped 16 minutes after the soup incident, with the reason listed as failure to maintain service standards. "Your intent," Eleanor said, "appears to have been protecting the comfort of wealthy people by exploiting everyone else." Derek swallowed. Colleen was crying silently now, mascara shining under the lights. Nathan spoke next, his voice level and almost gentle, which somehow made it hit harder. "Effective immediately, you are terminated for cause pending final legal review. Your system access has already been suspended. You are not to contact staff regarding this investigation. Human Resources will coordinate retrieval of personal belongings tomorrow under supervision." Derek looked at Eleanor then, really looked at her, and I saw the exact moment recognition landed fully. Not of her face. Of his mistake. Of the woman at table 16. Of the coat with soup on it. Of the person he had dismissed because she arrived alone and ordered tea. His mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing useful left to say. He stood slowly, as if the room had tilted beneath him. For one wild second I thought he might look at me with anger, but what I saw instead was something smaller and meaner. Shame, maybe. Or disbelief that someone he had ranked beneath the silverware was still sitting there when he was not. He left without another word. The door shut softly behind him. No one clapped. No one smiled. That is the thing about real consequences. They are quieter than people imagine. Eleanor waited until the room settled, then turned to the remaining managers. "This is not a victory lap," she said. "This is a repair job. Anyone still seated here will help decide whether this company deserves to keep serving the public at all." Then she looked at me, and her expression softened by a degree. "Claire, thank you for telling the truth in a room where lying had become a management strategy. I wish I could tell you I felt triumphant in that moment. Mostly I felt tired. Relieved. Sadder than I expected. Because a man had lost his job, yes, but also because an entire building full of people had spent years learning that dignity was negotiable if the check was large enough. And I knew, as I sat there under the private dining room lights with my hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, that getting rid of Derek was only the beginning. The harder part would be teaching the room how to see people again.